I'll start with our guest from Bangladesh. Munize completed her BA in English Literature from Bryn Mawr College and MA in Communications from Temple University in Pennsylvania. Her debut anthology Voices was launched at Hay Festival Dhaka 2013. Besides being a columnist for Daily Star and Ice Today magazine, she was editor of the Saturday Literary Review Daily Star. Her second book, Labyrinth, is a collaborative work with celebrated photographer Arif Hafiz, celebrating the indefatigable human spirit. It was launched last month in the Lit Fest. Mr. Saikia had his post-graduation from Delhi School of Economics, after which he taught economics at the Hindu College in Delhi University. He has worked as an officer in the Indian Economic Service and Indian Railway Service. Presently, he is an Indian Police Service officer in the rank of additional DGP in Assam. He's been a regular contributor to literary magazines and national dailies in Assamese and English. He has 18 short story collections and a novel published, and his list of awards is also given in the brochure. Sriram Karri, novelist and columnist, wrote his first book, History of Freedom Movement of India, at age of 12. His first published work, The Spiritual Supermarket, was longlisted for the Crossword Book Award, and his debut novel, Autobiography of a Mad Nation, was in the Mad Nation Street Prize longlist. He has written for the New York Times, The Guardian, The Hindu, The Indian Express, Deccan Chronicle, Wire, Scroll, etc. He's been a technology brander and has worked for TCS, ISB, Infosys, Satyam, and co-founded a tech startup. Finally, in conversation with them is Pranesh Prasad, a writer of literary fiction based in Australia. His published works include The Ultimate Laugh, which explores identity and terrorism, and A Half-Baked Life, which examines the 2002 Gujarat riots. He is currently working on a contemporary gender, religious and caste inequalities in a new novel, The Hidden Imam. He has been a speaker at numerous literary festivals. He is a trained economist and an animal welfare advocate. Over to you, Pranesh, to take forward this conversation.
I think
Sriram is doing it, sorry.
it got changed.
I just have prepared with only the questions, so difficult to change now. Okay, I hope this will be a enlightening session, this theme which needs no introduction, but also actually test out the truth about freedom. So I hope you will not be a nice, politically correct and sweet people that you are, but see if we can push the line of liberty. So I'll begin with the belief that before you speak, define your terms. So my question as an opening context for the three of you is, are we free? Can we hope to be absolutely free? Should freedom of expression be absolute? If not, where, who decides its terms?
These are very difficult questions, but the starting point is, I think, libertarian, which is John Stuart Mill. So the idea that the freedom of speech is vital for democracy. So I think it depends where we are on the democratic framework. And if you think we're a democracy, then yes, it is vital. The libertarian argument is basically that, from a legal perspective, the moralities of aspiration override the moralities of the individual in terms of legal theory. So constitutional law would actually promote that. So what that means is that, the collective bows down to the individual, and hence free speech is the winner in that space. Against that, you have the justified or unjustified restrictions on free speech. Now, it depends on the nature of the society. So if you just look at America, for starters, the First Amendment ensures free speech, basically. So you can use any F word, anything like that. It's all good. But I think this gathering we're talking about, artistic freedom, perhaps more than the random person down the road. We're talking about, what the artist can do or should do. So the question that becomes is that if we take Stuart Mill's argument, then it's a free speech for the artist. We can take it as far as we can. But we know there's justified and unjustified restrictions. Now in India's case, if you look at India's constitution, right, there are limitations. And these limitations are generally sentiment-based, with the exception being that Subhash Chandra Bose, the documents, things like that, could not be released on various grounds. And the other issue here is that when the constitution was being devised, they had this clause in there under 35 article, that section, that when it comes to Pakistan, you can say anything. So basically, absolute argument doesn't hold there in that space. But otherwise, freedom of speech is not absolute, I would say. So if you look at constitutions around the world, whether it's Australia, New Zealand, Britain, there is no such thing as an absolute freedom of speech. And why is that? Once again, you go to John Stuart Mill. There is a harm principle, that somebody will be harmed. So this brings into fore the notion of that, well, who are we harming? And why are we harming? So if you're using words or the writers are writing and it harms people, then obviously you have to, the legislative framework has to step in, or the government has to step in. And in India, there has been many unjustified stepping in. So over time with Salman Rushdie and all that sort of scenarios. So yeah. So on one side you have the free speech, and on the other side you have the limitations. And I think it's for the writer to actually test the boundaries. Where does the balance lie? And in doing that, I think the starting framework should be what's in the constitution and slowly push it. If you're not happy, you think you can bend it, then push it. You see, in the West, what is happening right now is that for a long time there was this gradual whittling down of the right to free speech. But with the rise of the right wing, now they're saying because we have a war on terror, officially, really speaking, for the last so many years, that free speech should be encouraged because it allows them to say what they want to say in the political domain, and hence in the artistic domain, with the cultural domination sort of, by de facto. So I'll give it to my friend here.
Thank you. In fact, when I was asking Damodar Mojo why you are putting a policeman to speak on freedom of expression, he said, now you will speak as a fiction writer. So please rest assured that you will not be in police custody when I talk, right? So, simply, we all understand from the the International Code of Human Rights and things like that, that it's basically the freedom of expression is basically holding an opinion without any impediments. Nobody can obstruct your holding opinions. Now, I will not talk about that because he has already taken care of the legal side of it. I'm going to whether literature needs freedom and freedom needs literature or not. This is the issue probably we all would like to talk about. We have been looking at, if we look at the human history, you will see that over the time, whenever there is freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thinking, you have all the best innovative ideas coming to this world. Whenever you see, if you look at the history of the Western world, when the domination of the religion on state had vanished, you started seeing a lot of new social structures developing, a lot of scientific ideas developing, and poorly the fellow like Galileo, when he talked about, when he was in the intern, and he was told that you please don't say that the sun, the earth revolves around the sun. He was put in the jail, and his words still haunts me so much. He said, it does. Still it does. That means still the earth moves around the sun, even if you put me in the jail. Today, in the last few years' time, when I was reading Mr. I think it was M. Thadi of Myanmar, who was in the jail for 20 years for writing fictions. without censorship. And that person has said, I can die for words. Simple, you look at the similarity, in terms of freedom of expression. What I mean to say is, until and unless you allow full freedom of thought and ideas, in a democratic society, in a free-thinking society, you will have very little to look forward to. So this is one point. Second point I would like to say is, the whole concept of internet has changed the question of freedom of expression. The whole landscape has been changed now, because you see, whatever he has talked about, maybe say you commit a crime of freedom of expression and things like that sitting in India earlier, but today in a frontierless world of internet, you may be punished even in a different country because the law is different. In fact, earlier when an author used to write in a piece of paper which will remain with him, it's just a self-expression. It would not go anywhere. Today, rather than putting it in his wall in front of his house, he's putting it on the wall of internet or in Facebook or in social media. It goes all over the world to 2 billion people. So such a powerful media you have, and if you have full 100% freedom, how to balance these two? Because as he has talked about already reasonable restrictions on freedom of expression, I think it's high time that we can balance it out. I remember in 1980s only, in one of the states in America, they were talking about, the public prosecutor was prosecuting. It's a very important case where a particular rock group, I think it was a live group, that particular album was talking, the lyrics of that particular album was talking something obscene, and the public prosecutor went for a case. The issue was so famous then because of the reasons, because never had been any lyrics of a song was put into test about violation of freedom of speech and things like that. So we are encountering in case of India and elsewhere, in earlier session they talked about bloggers being killed and things like that. In India, last few months, last few years, or all over, all the time, we have been seeing some sort of such issues coming up. Now I think it's very important that we must realize to what extent we will restrict, to what extent we will use 100% freedom. But I feel in a free-thinking society, no restriction on the thought process should be allowed because of the fact that it might give you better innovations, it might give you better ideas to try on. Later on we'll take it over.
Okay. To answer your first question, are we free? Yes, we are. Since the legal side of it has already been taken up, and Sir here mentioned also about the state side, I think essentially the thing is we are born free and we have, as he rightly said, a right to an opinion. Whether or not that expression comes out in the form of words or on a blog or in a book, that is the next step going forward. I will talk about just Bangladesh since that's what I've come to represent. We have the freedom to call strikes. We also have the freedom to then defy that strike and go ahead to a lit fest. So what does that say? Yes, we've had this discussion about the bloggers being killed, but I think, again, the freedom or this impression of freedom is how a lot of the media plays it out to be. So we hear a lot of talk about the bloggers being killed, and we heard a lot of talk about publishers also being shot. What we didn't hear was what happened the next day. What were those steps that were taken? What we didn't hear was whether the rest of us, those of us who live there, who are invested in there, who are raising our children there, how do we feel about that? And yet there was none of that coming out in the media. So yes, we're free to have our thoughts, we're free to have our opinions, we are also free to express pro-government, anti-government feelings. But interestingly, how the media picks that up is very different. And that is where you get the impression of whether or not a certain country, a certain state, a certain society is free. And I think the internet is actually a very interesting point to pick up on, because there's no gatekeeper there. So I don't particularly like you, and I'm just going to go out there and slander you. I have the freedom to do that. And you have the freedom to fight back at me as well. That goes across borders and across, I think the danger comes when there are very structured gatekeepers there, particularly people with vested interest.
They stole my next 3 questions: reasonable restriction, internet, and media. Anyway,
Wait, you told us to give you a hard time.
no constitution on the planet talks about the right to be offended. But this become like a ghost that's come from God knows where. It's everywhere. It's more important for everybody today to be offended and therefore to be protected against being offended than being human, than being liberal, than being free, than being, protected for his life, liberty, anything. The most important right on this planet right now seems to be, don't dare offend me. And please don't be so nice as you've been in the last question. And tell me this, is offense or the right to be offended the biggest danger to this planet? And because religion is the basis very often on which the right to be offended or to being protected against the right to be offended is spoken about, I'll directly ask you a question. Is religion incompatible with freedom of expression?
We're all
We can be here and write a book on this, but to start off, what I think you're talking about is whether we should have a separation of powers, basically, on the legal side. So the separation of the temple or the church or the mosque from the apparatus of the state. So I think if you have that in a pure sense, not in the French way, but you would probably ensure that, it probably even answers your first question in that space. We have that as a given. So, India, do we have that? Or, we have it in theory, but, in practice, in a pragmatic, practical way, the politicians and the populace run the show, right? So, hence, whatever suits their vested interest, as you said, is dominant. But how do we ensure separation of powers? Is merely having it in the Constitution enough? Or should there be a movement, which ensures that we continuously keep ourselves abreast? Even in say, Western countries, again, it's not a pure separation of powers. I mean, there is the executive, the legislative, and whatever. But it's still, there is that element which it bows down to the right or the left, for that matter. And where the right triumphs, you generally have the restrictions imposed, because something is offensive to someone. And I think the whole purpose of this thing is to bring people together. So whatever system we have is to bring people together, to make them go forward. And it cannot happen in just having, say, well, free speech, free thought. Okay, I can think free, but can I act freely? Like you talked about the fact that, these things happen the next day. But the fact that the other things happen is what is the problem. Basically, the fact that it can happen. And that is what we should be targeting our instruments towards, to ensure that.
But isn't that one of the targets against what did happen?
Yeah, but it determines it depends on where you are, I suppose. Like I go into certain areas. I went to Iran, and I was standing in Tehran, and they looked at my passport, and then they asked me whether I was Persian. I said no. So the first question was not whether I was Indian, whether I was Persian. So to me, I was threatened by the way they took me in initially, because I did not know what will happen now when the passport is gone. So whether it would come back to me or not, or whether somebody else would go with that passport. So the fear that was present in me, and I could not express that because I felt that at that point, there was no freedom of speech per se. But if I was standing somewhere else, perhaps maybe I could have voiced myself. So the fear was dominant inside me at that time. And hence, again, it depends on the society you're in.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult scenario, and this is a very broad topic. So it's really hard to tailor it now, and I think we should tailor it to the artistic part of it, because how do we write, how do we paint, rather than say have a broadsheet and say, well, this is how we should think, but how do we ensure that we can screw each other up, we can screw the government, and say put the finger up to them, without getting locked up.
No, but I think I would like to jump into this whole religion thing. Okay, so I'm a Muslim woman. I'm a practicing Muslim woman. I'm in a sari, which according to certain Muslim countries are not Islamic enough. I wear a bindi, which a lot of Indian Muslims do not wear. I come from a primarily Muslim country. But we have a secular state. So I will take this religion question and answer that. The problem comes not from the religion itself, but from the interpretations of it. And for every single interpretation that you have, the problem again is that we have propagated more of religious beliefs to suit our societal, patriarchal society, right? There was an audience member before who mentioned moderate mullahs. We don't get to hear about these moderate mullahs elsewhere. Why not? Because again, I guess it's not sexy enough, let's put it that way. Muslims need to be pegged down a certain way. So yeah, religion is offensive. So are gender issues, by the way. I would probably take more offense as a woman than I would as a Muslim. But for whatever reason, it's more fun to talk to me as a Muslim than as a woman.
Can I, please? We're getting somewhere though.
Yeah.
Sexy mullahs, middle finger.
There you go. It's the last session. She said we can do anything we want.
Get it on, get it on.
So, I don't think I will dehumanize it, right? So, no, but you see, one thing I would like to comment on about the offending, the offensive about this thing. See, a lot of loss of freedom of expression comes from the perceived threat, may not be the actual threat. You see, recently there was a sort of a survey in Norway, which is supposed to be supposed to be a country where you have a very high level of freedom of speech, and they basically the survey was done amongst the artists and the authors. It was very appropriate for us. Now they found that there are instances of more perceived threat than actual. If an author might think, if I write this way, there may be some sort of a threat coming from the society, from me. Say, for example, in our policing days, also in policing job, we find a lot of times people are afraid of perceived crimogenic situations than actual crimogenic situation. There may not be crimes, but people are scared of going out to the street thinking there might be, some crime. So let us be clear about it. But coming back to your offending, the right to offend, let me tell you one thing. You see, many times when we talk about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, we talk about basically we are bothered about the individual rights of few people, few individuals who really have the right to talk. But there are people in this world who are speechless. When we talk about freedom of expression, we never take them into account. The small, say a very high percentage of community in this world, they are losing their scripts every day. They are losing their language. They can't even write words because their language is almost vanishing. You see, I have been experimenting with fiction for the last so many years. I find the writing in text, writing in words, is such a simplistic art form, such a simple form of art. Just few calligraphic symbols you use, A, B, C, and you write without any color. You provide a tremendous amount of colorful imagination after that. Such a beautiful art. But these people are losing their language, these people are losing their scripts, these people are losing their text, and tomorrow they will have no expression in terms of art and literature. Number two is there are communities within the country who have no voices. In how, nobody hears their voice. Say for example, even small thing, not even we are too bothered about religion and other things, but there are other problems also. Let us not forget it. In certain communities, all over the world, there are the problems of witchcraft, there are problems of social superstitions, where a lot of women folks have lost their voice when the community members brand a woman as a witch. The women wrongly, absolutely false, sort of a thing, branding on her. She has no voice. Have we bothered about that, such type of voiceless people? We don't. We talk about here people who can write, who can, we can shout in the street. So let us all not only be bothered about offending, let us be bothered about not hearing the voices of these people in the community.
I think, I think what you're talking about initially is like, if there's harm coming out, then you have to put a test to it, it's a public test, in the legal sense of, is the harm actually leading to more harm or not? So, things like that happen, those types of concepts. Proportionality is what we're looking at.
I'll take the context of art very directly. Should the government in a democracy have the right to ban a book? Is it fair to have censorship in movies? And come on, give me an example of a work of art having harmed anybody physically. And we'll get more crisper and direct. One example of a work of art having gone and killed some believer, the sword from the pages of the book escaped and chopped heads. Something. Surely this is how they've impeached these people. Sorry, impeached. Sorry.
I think work of art, all religious texts have done that in some way. So I'm not going to say which ones, but I think all of them. You have had wars and you have had mutilations and rapes and whatever issues. It's all coming out of the religious texts, how they interpret how society is organized. So I think you can understand where I sit on the fence.
It's amazing that the gentleman from Australia is diplomatic and the lady from Bangladesh is so much
This is called freedom of expression.
There you go. No, it's actually interesting that you talk about art. Again, I think it does come from what is the majority of a societal feeling. No piece of art will necessarily harm you, but I think it's the interpretation of that, and I think it's a fear of power, losing power. When I was in Istanbul recently, and I was at the Hagia Sophia, and they had now recently they are starting to uncover what the Ottomans had covered up. So they had covered up angels, they had made them into flowers, and the flowers worked beautifully during the Ottoman period. And now there's a real need to uncover that history, and they're slowly taking that apart. So art isn't necessarily harmful, it's again a perceived harm. It's interesting because in Australia, for example, the Aboriginals, I think, had a really raw deal. But when I went, what impressed me was that they are taking steps to say, we gave you a raw deal, and now we're going to promote you. And I think there is your freedom of expression. You can have different concepts of what that freedom is, but why not make it progress? Why not make it a process? There is my truth today, the way I'm sitting today, it was not true for me even a year ago. So this is not an absolute, neither the freedom of it nor the expression of it, but the thought process continues.
But sorry, just a second on that about fictional art. Now, you say there's a good discussion. Had the literature been so powerful in this world, then there would not have been 2 world wars till, because none of the literature, none of the writing could stop those wars. But you look at the other side of it also. Had there not been a book by Hitler, Mein Kampf, probably less harm would have been done.
Okay, since we are towards the absolute very end of this, I'd like to, and it's a fault of the festival organizers, they give such nice people and say to a debate. Nobody's willing to abuse anybody, nobody, at least say that.
Can I just pick up on this?
Yeah.
I'll just tell you one story about what's happening with the Aboriginal writers. Now, there's a guy called Philip McLaren, I met him. And he was saying to me that every festival he goes in Australia, every event he goes, he's heckled by white people for expressing his Aboriginality.
Somebody heckle them.
So there you go. So it's not really, what you say.
Okay, nice audiences, nice panelists, what can you do? Actually, now beginning to believe free speech has hope and all that. The question I really, okay, 2 aspects. The fact is the mullahs are wonderful literary critics to have. You get reviewed in Times of India, the Goan, the Hindustan Times, the sales don't go up.
Yeah.
One review by a mullah, the father,
One
fatwa does wonders. So is this whole intolerance debate actually a creation by smart book publicists? How much does it charge to get a fatwa issued against you? Is it something small authors like me can afford, or only the bigger ones?
So Sriram, we have this Lit Fest in Dhaka in November.
She
come.
organized it.
No,
She never invited me.
my friends did. But please come to that and I'll make sure you get your answers.
Answers or
In words and in action.
So he has to travel all the way to get the answer there.
I don't need a return ticket, I suspect.
We can talk about that as well.
No, but seriously, tell me this. In the evening when you go back, just as you're about to sleep, do you dream of a world where truly an absolutely free world is possible, where the freedom of expression is absolute? Is it even a vague dream possible?
I think I'll just say it in one sentence from Faisal. It's फासला ऐसे भी होंगे ये कभी सोचा नहीं था सामने में बैठी थी पर वो मेरा नहीं था.
Translate. Can you translate? Can you translate that for me?
Well, this applies to India and Pakistan. When he wrote it, he said, "फासले ऐसे भी होंगे ये कभी सोचा नहीं था." The separation between us, that I had never thought it was going to be like. सामने बैठी हुई थी लेकिन वो मेरा नहीं था. So I can. She's sitting in front of me, but she is not mine. So free speech is like that. The restrictions are like that. The life of an artist is like that.
No, but if everybody starts dreaming like that, a free world, then I would be very much strange in my work
You'll
as
be
a policeman. I will be overworking.
Yeah, sure. I'll answer your question with a little story. So, now Bangladesh has accepted transgender as a third gender. And you would think, oh, this is great, right? This is a real movement in the right direction. I teach high school children. And for the Lit Fest, I'm not plugging it, but it keeps coming out because we just finished it. And at the Lit Fest, you're supposed to register for it. It's free, but you register for it. So my high school student says, Miss, I really have a complaint against this. I said, what? They have male, female, and transgender. So I said, what else do you want? She said, no. What if I haven't decided? We need a not decided, tick mark there, a checkbox there. And for me, I think the fact that this 14-year-old girl is telling me, and she's thinking it, I am hopeful.
Now we go to the audience. Please do not smartly disguise your questions. and give speeches or plug your own books. One-line sentences ending in a question mark is my definition of a question. Single sentence ending in a question mark questions. Go, have a go.
So I'm really grateful to you, to the mediator, because when it comes to freedom of speech, I come from the late Christopher Hitchens school of thought, and political correctness is not my kind of thing. So I want to make a slight commentary on what he said about secularity.
One line question ending in a question mark.
Exactly. Okay. Does anyone have a question here then? That's good.
The lady has. And
in a single line, question addressed to anyone on the panel. Has there ever been an instance where you felt that you must censor yourself in your writings, something that you think you cannot say?
one line answer? You can make it half a line or something.
In terms of writing about sex, in terms of the words that come out, yes, sometimes. Because my father always reads my words.
Some more questions.
Any more questions? Would you like to answer self-censorship?
Yeah.
Basically, she's asking a very nice, are you covered at some point in time in the past?
Yes, I would definitely say that I have censored myself. I think when I was writing much earlier on, I was worried about what my mom is going to think, what is my brother-in-law going to think, things like that. But again, if you do take that first step and you decide, you know what, I'm just going to write about, I don't know, something like this girl talking about not wanting to choose a gender. If you take that first step, I think the next year or the next time it gets a little easier, and that's the path that I would like to think I'm taking.
One line answer is, I self-censor because if I write whatever I think, whatever ideas come to my mind, I'll put in the lunatic asylum. I just can't write all the things which come. I just use a filter. Thank you.
There's a question there.
But aren't we talking? I mean, can I ask Annie's question a second time? Have you ever stopped yourself from? Have you ever self-censored? Not because of your mother, your brother, your God knows what, your friend next door, but because you were afraid that your government or some other government, some authority was going to restrict your freedom or the freedom of someone else because of something you wanted to say and stopped yourself from saying it. Is that okay, Annie?
Yeah, please, thank you.
I'll give a one-word answer to that. No.
Yeah, that's me again. I'm back.
I would have answered my mother-in-law, but bigger authority than all that.
Yes.
I'd like to just answer that. It depends who you're writing for. As a writer, I firstly write for myself. I don't worry about the audience. The book is for myself, the prose is for myself. And if I feel that it's up to the stage where it can be published, then I send it out. So until, I'm not sitting there and saying, well, okay, let me try to win some prize by doing this writing. No. It's a matter of saying, well, I just write for myself. I write 1,000 words a day, that's it. And if it offends, it offends. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I, as a government servant, I do think about it because I am bound by certain terms and conditions which I have signed before joining the service. So I do think about it, but I have seen over time that hasn't crippled my writing at all, that thought.
Yes, don't you feel that intolerance is a slippery slope? I mean, there are 1.3 billion Indians in India, and 1.3 billion people have 1.3 billion issues over which they're intolerant. So you either be sensitive to all the issues or you be sensitive to none. So you can't be sensitive to all the issues, right? So intolerance and being offended is a very slippery slope.
I think it is a slope, but whether it's slippery or not, I really don't know. So.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, please, of course.
You're right, intolerance is a slippery slope, but you know how we have been talking about everyone has a right to an opinion, everyone also has a right to be intolerant of that. I think it's in the way, it's in whether you're attracting bees with honey or with vinegar. I think I'm getting that expression all mixed up, but you know what I'm saying, right? You pick your battles, right? And if there are certain ways that you can word it without I'm not necessarily politically correct, but I am sensitive to somebody I may not agree with, but I'm not the kind of person who would think, well, I'm just going to offend for the sake of offending. So if I can get my point across without necessarily excluding you from my opinion, but including you in what may be a larger circle, then I'm happy to do that. Intolerance, how you express it, is also as important as my opinion and how I express it. Does that make sense?
I think, ma'am, you kind of...
There's a question there in the end. Can we go to the last question?
Mrs. Saikia, in the course of your other life as a police officer, have you ever had cause to impede freedom of expression?
You see, I initially only I say that, let us not take it as a sort of discuss story here. But even in when I have interrogated people, when I have encountered with people, I have somehow, maybe what Mojo was saying, that fiction writer Saikia should come here. So that particular person helps me not to, cut the freedom of expression of that person, Sometimes that person appears and he just obstructs me in certain words. So I don't think I have done it beyond the legal provision so far. At least, in fact, just I'll take a second only to tell you, during my speech, I've been talking about particular community, particular marginal people who have lost their voices and speeches. I have been working since 2001 in a particular project which was my initiative to reach out to the marginal community in interior tribal areas. I've been working in more than 80 villages to trying to give the voices to the women of those tribal society to fight against social prejudices like witchcraft, witch hunting and things like that. So I feel that at least that I'm trying to give voices to these people through empowerment, So generally I don't think I have done that sort of a thing. Anyway, thank you very much. And
in your conclusion, never forget, policemen very actively encourage free speech. What do you think interrogation is all about? Now, we go, but not before they answer this question, for the gentleman on the last row. Fish from the sea or the river?
From the sea. But if you can find me a recipe and cook it for me and convince me, I'll come around.
Right person for that. Would you like to add that? Sea or river?
I don't take sea fish, In Assam, you have a lot of rivers, a lot of fish and things like that. But mostly a lot of fish, illich fish. Yeah, it comes from Bangladesh.
And it flows against the current.
Yeah, it flows against the current. So that's also good innovative way of thriving. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you so much.